right,
And
so
then
am I
I will-
supposed to be,
Yep,
are you
I was
doing
going
this, Rebecca?
to turn it over to you, Brian.
All right, well, this is the Bylaws and Policy Committee of CCS. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022 at 1:30. Can we get a roll call?
Start with the last names. Bunnell,
Here.
Davis. Scott, you're muted. Thank you. I see you. Dorfman.
Here.
Thank you. Chikaki.
Here.
Kim.
Here.
Novak.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
And guests, we have Kate Hall.
I'm here from Northbrook, but also as the chair of database management.
And for CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski, Deborah Wishmeyer, and Beth Stonebrenner.
All right, Scott, I saw you you're moving your mouth. I'm not sure if you're really trying to talk or what that was there, but we could not hear you. Okay, so just wanted to make sure you could get that. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. All right, is there any public comment? All right, can we get an approval of the minutes of the April 29th, 2021 meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. A second.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, can we get a roll call?
Bunnell,
Aye.
Davis. You said you were going to chat, and I see you shaking your head. Thank you. Dorfman.
Aye.
Chikaki.
Aye.
Kim.
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, policy updates. So Rebecca, am I turning this over to you to talk about the policy updates?
Yes. So as I said in the follow-up email, and I apologize for not including more context ahead of time. I do realize it's a giant document. There are just a couple of changes in this. The mission and vision have already been approved by governing board and with the strategic plan. I'm just updating them in this document. Similarly, last year, governing board added development fund balance guidelines to the existing fiscal accountability policy. So this version of the document takes those in. So the changes that we really have this time to talk about is the addition of the resource sharing policy. And then there's just a couple of minor language changes, she, her to they, them, and removing monthly from billing. So Kate and Deborah are here from database management if we have questions about the work of the committee. Quick call out to the group. I do have some slides if you'd like some background on this policy and a quick summary of the data. But if you're all like, whatever, sounds good, like I don't have to go through them, but I'm happy to do that if that would be helpful to any of you.
I'm good, Rebecca.
Okay, then just super quick, based on the data that we examined, for the most part, libraries would not have to change their existing practices to adhere to this policy, except for adding this days first available setting, which they could do in item record profiles. We could help them do that. So it would be really sort of hands off for staff. I'm happy to address specific questions folks have about it. Database management worked on this for a year approximately. So I think we've heard every question that could exist, and between the three of us, one of us would be able to answer.
So, I think my only question that I had with it was the data that you have in the slide, it was all COVID, during COVID kind of data. So do we not have any information from pre-COVID? Is that going to be a question that others on the governing board are going to have questions about that just needs to be, that we just need to be aware of?
Yeah, so we don't have data to this level of specificity pre-COVID because we had to essentially create a special data set and track it. once holes are filled, that data is gone from the system. So we do realize we're operating at sort of a lower threshold. But we also have seen that many libraries adjusted their spending as well. So it is not something I am particularly worried about based on our recommendation and kind of how it aligns with the data. I think there's also a pretty significant cushion where like, we're recommending like 90 days. I think even if we had said 30 days, based on this data, that would have been perfectly reasonable. So I think we have the ability to kind of monitor and see if we need to adjust, but the short answer is no. We don't
Can
have that
I
data.
Okay,
add
and,
one-
and I'm fine with that. And
Yeah.
I just, I just can imagine that there might be other questions about that,
Yep.
just from a governing board perspective. And so maybe just to address that right up front so that,
Absolutely.
that's kind of known. I have no problem with the policy. That was the only question that I had with it. So.
And if I could add just one thing to what Rebecca said, like from my perspective, when we were looking at it in database management, the fact that it was a curated list deliberately designed to look at very high demand titles, we weren't looking at it across everything. We specifically chose titles that were in high demand. And typically, from what I saw, it was the same high demand that we saw, before COVID. It wasn't that suddenly, like the high demand titles were still in high demand, even though our overall checkouts were dropping. And so I think that there's a good comparison to be made. So it isn't necessarily that we're going to see wildly different data because of how CCS staff curated the record set to really get to the heart of what are the pain points and which titles really offer us the most, possibly would offer the most interest to patrons, and how do we make sure that we get those into patrons' hands. So I don't know if that helps as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I just think though that, COVID was not only a change in patron behavior, but it was also a change in publishing, in terms of what we saw come out, and there was just it was weird. I mean, it's been weirdness on so many different levels that it's, I think just being able to say like, we've taken that into account, even though this is COVID, we've taken that into account when we're looking at this, I think would just be a good thing to just kind of state up front.
Can I, if I may, Displays doesn't protect its new books, so it won't matter to us. But I'm just wondering, Rebecca, how many libraries now would this 90-day rule affect? I mean, meaning who has hold periods longer than 90 days? How many libraries are there?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a hard question to answer because of library practices. Many of the libraries don't have specific timeframes that they adhere to, and they go by space on their shelves and say, oh, it's full today, so I'm going to go through and pull the oldest ones off and kind of wait for them to appear on the shelf. I do think that there is a big range, and one of the comments and concerns we've regularly addressed is that your material, it's been hard for staff to separate the idea of like a new item with a holdable item. It's like, well, once it's holdable, it's not new anymore. But that's not true, as you very well know, Joe. You can have new items on a new shelf that are eligible to fill holds. So what the setting that we would procedurally write in for folks to use does is that at that 90-day time period, it would flip from being restricted to hold to being holdable. Staff could still move things from the new shelf at 120 days if they want to, if the library wants to do that. So the length of time that an item is new would not have to change. It would just be, you might have to go to the new shelf to fill that hold. But yes, so as far as when libraries are changing, Deborah, I don't know if there's anything you want to address in there. We do see a wide range based on a lot of different factors.
I'm just thinking, and I don't know, because I don't want to hurt the small libraries that feel they need to protect their new books. And I just was trying to figure out if there's a lot of them, or, you know, who exactly is going to not like this policy? Who is this, who's going to interpret it as hurting their circulation or their collections?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and was kind of the reason that it took us so long at database management to go through all of this. Deborah and Bob, and then the database management team spent a lot of time, like the data that you saw in my little handout was a very small amount of all of the data that they looked at. And the reason that we spent so much time and like gathered this special data set was specifically to look at what you're asking, Joe. Like, are there libraries that, one, are not pulling their weight? And if we made this change, like everything would go to Northbrook because they don't buy enough copies for all of their holds placing patrons.
I've heard that about Northbrook, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
I think you're getting us confused with Indian Trails, I think.
So we did find that all of the libraries were meeting their local demand. There were literally no outliers where it was like, well, this library really doesn't buy enough copies and there'll be a drain on anyone. So the purchasing that the small libraries are doing is, you know, less than the purchasing the large libraries are doing. But what we're seeing is that everybody is like proportionately doing what they need to do. So this shouldn't harm anyone.
All right, thanks.
Again, there's always, we'll have to monitor it, but that is kind of what we spent a lot of time looking at, which again, props to Deborah and Bob and the team. I was just like, whoa, that's a lot of data. And Scott has a comment in the chat, which I'll read just for the recording. It says, I think the data analysis does a good job of showing the diminishing copies to holds ratio once a little over a month has passed and makes 90 days very reasonable. So again, and we looked at that at an individual library basis too. You're seeing the aggregate data, but we were able to look at that, and database management looked at that library by library as well.
Thank you.
All right, are there other questions at this point? All right, seeing none, I think, thank you very much for your work on this, and database management group for their work on this. I think this is great. We'll bring this forward. This is going then to the April meeting, right?
Yes.
Governing board. Okay.
Yes.
So, all right. Thank you.
I mean, don't you have to do a recommendation?
We have to do something? Do we have to vote?
Yes.
All right, so I guess
Yes.
somebody needs to vote to recommend. Sorry. You know what? I don't, I'm not usually on this side of the.
I wasn't going to let you go. I was going to pull it back together.
Yeah, like I told you, you could say, hey, you know, I told you that before. You could just tell me, like, Brian, you're not doing it right. Just, you know, do your job, buddy. All right. So does somebody want to move that we approve
I move
or that work with
to
this policy?
I move to accept the modified bylaws as presented.
Policies.
Policy as presented.
Second.
Can I just, before we move to vote, on page 8, number 7, there's a typo.
Oh, thank you.
Instead of them, it says then when it should say them. In the last line of point 7.
Oh, page 8.
Page 8.7. Yeah. Asserted against,
enough.
we crossed out him and then put then when
It should be
say them.
Okay. Whether or not CCS would have the power to indemnify them against such liability under this policy. Okay.
And can I ask who was the second?
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
I thought, okay. Are you ready for roll then, Brian?
All right, I think we're ready for a roll call. Yep.
Thank you. Linnell,
Yes.
Davis. Thank you, I see that. Dorfman,
Yes.
Takaki,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Novak,
Yes.
and Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. There are no bylaw updates. So we have nothing. Does anybody have anything to discuss related to bylaws? Did anybody see anything that they wanted? Because this says bylaws updates not recommended, but or anything? All right, so next steps, I've turned this back over to Rebecca again.
Yeah, we'll send this to governing board in April. Via email, Brian did suggest that we look at removing the Patriot Act policy, which we did talk a little bit about last year as well. I do think we'll want to adjust some language in the privacy policy just to make sure all of our bases are covered. So I did ask if we could save that for the next meeting. But from my point of view, I am very comfortable with that next meeting being after July 1. So your responsibilities as the Bylaws and Policy Committee would be up. We would be delighted to have you back on the committee again next year. And we'll send out in the next couple of months the call for any requests to change committee assignments. So would be delighted to have you back for this very rigorous and time-consuming committee.
All right, well, thank you. So do we have anything else for the good of the group? Otherwise, we are adjourned at 1:47.
My kind of
Great.
committee meeting.
Have a nice day, everyone. Thanks
Yeah,
for,
this
thanks
is-
for all the work.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, do you have a second
I sure do.
for a non-database management committee related question?
Yes, Beth, will you stop the recording, please?
Just trying to find it.